Welcome to the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast with your hosts, Mike Randall and Gus Kearns.
Welcome in, listeners, to the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast, where we're always talking everything college hoops. You could have been anywhere else on the dial, but you chose to be here with us, Mike and Gus. We appreciate that. Mike, I am happy that we are able to provide some sort of distraction to what might be happening in the real world out there. Mike, let's talk some college hoop for the people out there. How was your weekend, and how's been the college basketball treating you thus far?
Oh, it's been fantastic. And certainly we need a distraction today more than ever with the chaos that's going down in Washington. But yeah, college hoops is great. Never disappoints. Up, down, up, down. I feel, Gus, like games, my in-game wagering is not going well. I feel like weird stuff is happening. Teams are up big early. They rarely hold the lead. They're down. They come back. Sometimes when games are close, you think they're going to be close. They're blowouts. Very roller coastery, helter-skelter, exactly how we like it, right?
I think that's exactly, and we can even maybe add another element to that because of the so-called home court advantage that is in play in some arenas and completely out of play in other arenas. So just when you think you might have something figured out or you might stumble onto a trend, that trend obviously goes tipsy, haywire, and upside down because of the lack of that usual reliable home court advantage that might exist for that one team or that one program. But maybe not the case this year. This year is unlike any other college basketball year or any other sports year that we've experienced. And to be honest, it's providing for a couple of exciting things.
Oh, super exciting. I mean, tonight we have Creighton taking Seton Hall to the woodshed. Then we have Michigan in a game I thought was going to be close, destroying Minnesota. I mean, we have just stuff is weird stuff is happening as they're trying to get a handle on it. Virginia was down to Wake Forest at the half, and they're coming back now, but still.
Duke, BC, we could bring that one up as well.
Yeah.
I mean, there's plenty of examples that are showing once we get in conference, this is going to get a little tricky, and that's usually the way it goes. So it's really not necessarily going according to plan, but it is at least following a semi-predictable script as far as the in-play goes, in conference play goes, because once these teams get to know each other, there are a couple of things that you could lock onto. So let's see if we can lock onto a couple of those things along the way on our conversation for the college basketball listeners out there. Mike, a couple of important pieces of news that we need to get to right away. Let's talk about the net ranking reaction. The first net ratings came out this week, and there was a couple of highlights that we can talk through. And then also there's a plan. There's hope. There's a light at the end of the proverbial sports tunnel for March Madness with a game plan of holding every contest in Indiana. They're all in Indiana, so we might need to visit that as well. But, Mike, let's start with the net ratings. What were your initial thoughts? Things have changed a little bit, but what do you think after that first initial rating that came out? A couple things that stood out to you.
College basketball makes me like the guy who sits back. I mean, I've sent you this GIF, the popcorn. He sits back. I mean, besides that, and Angela Lansbury also eating popcorn in my too that I like to send. Whenever I see, the Nets coming out, this is exciting. Colorado State's on against San Diego State. Oh, this is exciting. So the net comes out. I'm very excited. A couple things right away. Teams with 4 quadrant wins at the time, of course, has changed a little bit. Zags, Missouri, Houston, only ones at the time. LSU was 23rd despite 0 quadrant 1 or 2 wins. Now they're 20th despite, I think they got Georgia tonight. They get Georgia, so maybe that was the first one. But they had no quadrant 1 wins, but they still were ranked high. Colgate, of course, is really high. They're back down a little bit now. 12 of the 14 Big Ten teams were in the top 51, essentially the top 50, right? Boise State was 13th. Now they're 12th. They're creeping up tonight. They have Air Force to probably pound them at home. And the undefeated teams, Gus, that have to be noticed, Zags, Baylor, Michigan, Drake, Winthrop. That's 1st, 2nd, 6th, 20th for Drake, and 39th for Winthrop when it came out. So overall, man, liked it. I'm excited that we're even talking about it. Really cool stuff with the net.
I think that there's a couple of things that stood out to me. Number one, I think you mentioned right at the top with Mizzou and Houston. LSU, interesting. I think they might hang around that area. By the way, Cam Thompson is absolutely bananas. He's playing unbelievably well. We'll get to him a little bit later in the program. And then I think, Boise, I kind of like them. I don't think that 13th or 12th or somewhere inside the top 25 is completely bananas, crazy, and off base. That's a dangerous team. They have Derek Olsen Jr., who
Love Derek. I've been talking about Derek Olsen for 2 years. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he came back this year. They have the 2 Arizona transfers. So, and they play the game the right way. That's a really interesting team moving forward. And you mentioned the undefeateds. Love that Drake and Winthrop are as high as they are, and still like the darlings. And we talked a little Winthrop and a little Drake. You've been on Drake the whole entire season. Both of those teams are kind of interesting for different reasons. Drake, with just the athletes that they put out there and the style of play, they remind me a little bit of Buffalo from a couple of years ago.
Oh, what a call! What a call! Yes.
Right, they have that kind of toughness, that kind of flexibility on the perimeter as far as their switchability and just their overall athleticism and skill at each position. It seems like that they might fall into that model, and Winthrop just plays at a really fun pace. So they're a great watch with Waldron running the show there, among the nation's leaders in assists, standing at 6'7". He's one of the most unique players in the nation. What was your takeaway from the plan, the hope, the light at the end of the tunnel of the NCAA proposing to hold every single March Madness game inside one state in not a necessary bubble, but at least a little bit of a controlled environment inside Indiana? We need a little bit of something to hold on to grasp onto, like that carrot or that's hanging above our head that we can kind of look towards and be like, you know what? I think that's something I can get to. I think that's something I can wait for. I think that's something I can get excited for. What was your takeaway from that plan? Did it provide you the same amount of hope that it did for me?
Yeah, it's the only logical thing. You, myself, the other people who love college basketball, all of our listeners, of course. Guys, if we all got together, I'm sure we'd say the exact same thing. You have to bubble. We saw the NBA. It worked with the NBA. They were the best ones to do it. The NFL has done a decent job, but there's been some ups and downs, and there's a week between games. So that's different. We're going to have to go rapid fire, a bunch of games on one weekend, maybe not wait a whole weekend to play the game, so maybe you won't wait for a long period of time. They'll come up with something. Bubble's the only way to go. We love Indy. It's a great city. We've been there. A lot of resources around, different campuses, IU. So I love the bubble. The bubble works. It keeps us together. It minimizes the chance, and it gives us all an NCAA tournament. Gus, under no circumstances could we have no NCAA tournament for second year in a row. That was out of the question. So I'm just happy they have a plan. And yes, I think it's a logical one. We have to bubble. Could you argue Vegas because all the hotels? Sure, but that's massive distractions. Let's go to Indy, keep it safe. Hickory Huskers, Jimmy Chipwood, tournament in a bubble. Mask Madness. Very excited.
Masked Madness. I kind of like that. Here are the two things. Actually, I have three things. So first thing is, since there can't be any first four at Dayton, which is like the traditional start to the tournament, now that they've gone to 68 teams, why not hold that first four at Hinkle? That seems like it would be a really cool venue to do that. And then you talked bubble, Mike. And I think if they can adjust and maybe condense the first 2 weekends and that first four and condense the amount of days that it's going to take there, maybe just do 1 day off between those rounds after Selection Sunday, then you have all of those teams that would be in a bubble for maybe a week. And then you're down to 16 teams. So as crazy and as illogical it seems to have 68 programs and all of the bells and whistles that go with each one of those programs and, the close family members that will be allowed to watch those, hopefully, fingers crossed, watch all of those programs and participants and student athletes play. After that condensed schedule, you're only going to have to do that for 68 teams for about a week. And then you'll be down to the Sweet 16. And then you only have to worry about 16 teams. And then you're dealing with a similar situation that the NBA dealt with their 22 teams in the bubble. So it seems unmanageable at the front end when you just think about it logistically. 68 teams, that seems unmanageable. But if you can condense it early on up front, with move the first four a little further in and then squeeze that next round a little bit closer with just a day off, I think you can do it. And then I think you still get that feel for the Sweet 16 and you only have to take care of 16 programs after that. That seems a little bit more manageable. I'm kind of looking forward to any other information, any other plan that they have moving forward with it.
Yeah, it totally makes sense because the teams are eliminated. They don't have to stay there.
Right.
For the NBA, you had all these teams staying. You're going to be whittling it down slower and slower and slower. I don't think they can go a whole week. I think they have to forego the Friday, Saturday, Sunday. My recommendation, to give them 2 or 3 days. They don't need a week because they want to get them in and out as fast as possible. And the longer they hang there, the longer there's a risk of an interruption or something. So
Correct.
that would be my only small suggestion, but I agree with everything you said.
Okay. The other part, so Hinkle, condensing the schedule. And then the last part is once you get to that 16 teams, then we talked about that word normalcy, and then that would really bring that back. Once you have a Sweet 16 with those Thursday, Friday games leading into Elite 8 games on the weekend, and then you can have your, then we're looking at a Final Four. Now we're talking. And most of these programs are probably going to do most of their learning remote. So it's not like the kids that are those programs and student athletes that are going to make the Final Four, they'll be there for 3 weeks. They'll be bubbled up for 3 weeks. They can still keep up with all their classes online, virtually. So it kind of makes sense on that front.
Excited for it. We're making progress. The teams have gotten more games in here than I thought. And as the warmer weather comes, I think things will subside like they did in our country. So across the board, just good mojo, man.
I like the mojo. I'm with you on the mojo. And then speaking of a mask madness, Mike, I think we have to mention that BU and Holy Cross, they masked up in a game. And NBA has, made their mask recommendations for players that are coming in and out of the game on the bench. BU and Holy Cross actually played the game with the student athletes with the masks on the court. It was an odd look. A lot of the masks came drooping down, which is totally fine. But the effort was there, and I think the visual of that game makes a little bit of an impact and shows how much sacrifice both of these programs, all the student athletes, all the coaching staffs and the athletic staffs associated with each one of these programs are trying to sacrifice to get this game in front of our eyes and get these games contested for the bigger picture we just talked about, which is going to be March Madness. So, Mike, did you have any like bigger, grander idea or something that you took away from as far as BU and Holy Cross playing with masks in the game?
I actually watched both of these games. Gus knows why that's even funnier than most of you will realize, but I watched the entire thing on the computer, both games, because I have a lot of issues in many ways. But the first game, I saw BU with it. My initial reaction, the game was at Holy Cross, the first one, was, wow, that's kind of an advantage for Holy Cross. Now, listen, I'm sure they practice with it, and I have no problem with them being safe. But my first reaction was, that's odd that one team is wearing it. So then when they wore it the second time, it made a lot of sense. There really was no difference. I don't think it hurt anyone because the game and BU's missing a few players, obviously, but it went exactly the way I thought it would. The teams were evenly matched the first time, and then they were evenly matched the second time. I was surprised they were evenly matched the first time, but I didn't feel that the mask hindered them in any way. I think it's the new normal. And honestly, I was worried at first because when I go running, Gus, I don't wear a mask, outside. But I'm like, you know what? If this is what we had to do to play basketball, we'd adjust, man. Okay, because we want to play, and that's just the way it has to be. And shooters going to shoot, and rebounders are going to rebound, and charges are going to be taken, and that's what happened. So I first game I was a little taken aback. Second game, let's roll with it.
And Mike, that leads us to programs that aren't going exactly according to plan. Villanova had to pause because of Coach Wright, and then Coach K is sitting out a couple of games. So, Mike, there's games that are canceled and postponed. When you look at your feed and you take a look at what games are on the slate, and I know you do this for the Action Network, by the way, please don't be afraid to give Mike a follow on Twitter at Randall Rant. Don't be afraid to give the podcast a follow at SDS Podcast, Efficiency of Keystrokes, of course, on Twitter, and follow Mike's work over at the Action Network as well. So, Mike, I know when you write these things up and then you go ahead and take a look at the slate and you see some of these games and that are canceled or postponed or whatever the term is that might be. What did you feel, and do you sway one way or the other on, is this going to continue? Is this going to be like how the season is going to roll out? Do you expect more of the slate to be canceled? What was your feel on that?
You and I both are positive people by nature. So I just try to make a positive out of negative. Always have, always will. And what I've done is, for example, when Fordham hasn't played for a really long time, and they haven't played at all this year, and they open up against G-Dub Thank you very much. Okay. So that I'm incorporating if there's been a long layoff tonight, Syracuse, Pitt, both a long layoff. Don't think Syracuse is the type of team because they always struggle early on in the year, right?
Yep.
I'm not giving 11. Okay. I'm taking the 11. Thank you very much. Should have bet the money line. As far as the coaches, it's a big disruption. I can understand how it's frustrating, but Gus, it's here.
Right.
And it's affecting everybody.
Yep.
So you know what? I'm done complaining about it. It's January of 2021. This started on March 13th, Friday the 13th of March, out here at least, in terms of where it really ramped up in last year. So you know what? You got to adjust. And man, Mark Few's adjusted, right? Doesn't practice for 2 weeks, and he takes Iowa out to the woodshed and drills them. Practice, okay? So my mindset now is it's here. You could lose a guy or two. It's next man up. Deal with it. Practice. Have backup plans. What would we do? We drill for it. Just like in the 60s, they were doing the bomb drills. Then, unfortunately, in schools, we had to do lockdown shooter drills, right? Now It's here. Let's adjust. Let's get a plan. And it's not surprising that the great coaches coach. Bill Self, guys are hurt, loses to Texas, goes out to TCU, drops the hammer last night. Mark Few, Iowa, undefeated, third team in the country, haven't practiced for 2 weeks. Smell you later. Great coaches are great coaches, and I think they're adapting.
I agree with you on the adaptation that great coaches have that as a characteristic. My takeaway or my overarching thought might be or is, as long as there's not another Keontae Johnson type situation.
Oh, yes, of course.
Where something happens on the court and is really visible, I think we're okay. However, if we have another one of those and it doesn't have not necessarily a happy ending because we're so happy that, and so pleased that Keontae is now back on the bench. He's helping out at practice. They've given him the monkey year of coach, which is really cool. You can see he's being really active on the bench as well. So that's kind of that situation was unbelievably frightening and scary. And it took your breath away when you saw it and heard about it and read about it and followed up about it. As long as we don't have one of those, and people are just going to take care of themselves and they're going to trust their doctors, their health staffs, and their medical staffs at those programs, which are excellent, many places around the country, then I'm cool with it. And everybody just has to take their precautions. But I think if we have another one of those, then we might run into a problem, not just in our sport, but just in sports in general. You're getting around a tiny bit. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your visit with the big man on campus over on his pod over at Barstool?
Yeah, super fun. Jeff Nato, friend of the pod, love him. Big man on campus. Got the big job there at Barstool. He's killing it. Love the guy. Just a normal betting guy. Knows college basketball, great knowledge, works hard, doesn't get too high, doesn't get too low. Love following him on Twitter. Really happy to be on. We talked some ball, did an hour, did a Manscaped commercial. What's better than that?
I love that you snuck in the Manscaped. That's hilarious.
He said to me, he's like, we got a Manscaped commercial. I said, I did that for Rotoviz mailbag. You're kidding me? He's like, oh, it's a little odd. I go, I'm used to. I know exactly what to say.
Perfect.
You got to trim down there for your. I get it. Whatever. Hey, you got to pay the bills, right, Gus?
That's totally right. Love that you helped them pay the bills. Really enjoyed when Jeff came on our podcast. We talked a little Philly hoops and the like. So we're big fans and happy for him over there. That sounds great. I'm glad you guys got to catch up and talk some ball for the listeners out there. It's a fun listen for sure if you haven't listened to it yet. All right, Mike. We got some rescheduling. And we'll get to this maybe a little bit later in the pod, but I'm
looking it up right now. Go ahead.
I think we might need to talk about
I'm looking again.
The rescheduled game for Thursday. Gonzaga and BYU had different opponents, and both of their opponents are on COVID pauses, so they're going to be scheduled, and they're rescheduled for Thursday night. Mike, this is the one game, along with maybe St. Mary's, that people were worried about in conference for Gonzaga as far as
oh, come on.
They go undefeated or something of that nature. So, Mike, number one, what do you feel like the line should be at? Or maybe you have some insider information over there through the Action Network. And what do you think might happen in this?
Just banged it. I just banged it. What do you think it is? I just bet it. I bet 1 unit on the Action Network app.
Okay. So you bet the Action Network. Take us
Thursday, 8:30, BYU at Gonzaga in Spokane. Tell me what it is. Go ahead.
Is it 14 and a half?
17 and a half.
17 and a half. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So they beat Iowa by 10, 12?
Ah.
Okay. And here comes Matt Harms. Okay. Just banged it one unit. I'm already +1 for tomorrow. Go ahead.
Okay, very good. All right, so I like where your head's at with that. I can't wait to view that. I'm so excited that the viewers get to view that as well. And that again could be the biggest hurdle because there is chatter as far as like, is this the best Zags team that Mark Few has ever had? I think that's up for discussion, no doubt.
Gus, did you see that tweet I put out that I think I sent it to you and Dr. Tony called it basketball porn? The Jalen Suggs spin, the spin pass.
Man, I know that they're going to kill the narrative of like, well, Jalen Suggs is a high school quarterback. I don't care if you're playing I don't know, if you're playing shuffleboard. That pass was ridiculous. I don't care if you're a high school quarterback or if you're a high jumper. I mean, he is unbelievably talented. And let's just talk about that really fast because I know that you are of the mindset that, maybe he could be the number one pick over Cunningham. And so I've thought about this, okay? And then went back and, obviously, both you and I watch a ton of tape, quote unquote, but we'll go back and watch, Cunningham, we'll watch Suggs, we'll go back and rewatch a game just for a certain play or to highlight a certain player or maybe take a peek at a skill set or an out of bounds play. Like that's kind of what we do. That's why we do the podcast. And here's what I think you might have a case. Suggs is way more explosive than Cunningham. Cunningham kind of plays at his own speed. He's a great herky-jerky type of Kyle Anderson, but way more athletic type point guard. And Suggs is just going to dunk on your head. So I think you might have a case because Suggs is way more athletic, way more explosive, a lot more vertical, a lot more verticality to his game than Cunningham's game. Cunningham's super smooth. He's unbelievably skilled with the ball. He's crafty. He can do a zillion different things to score on you. But yeah, I think you might be onto something because when you said that got me thinking. I was like, is this a real thing? And when I went back and took a look at everything, yeah, it might be a real thing.
Yeah, I like Cunningham. I mean, he's so versatile. He's Swiss Army knife. I watched him the other night against West Virginia. He made a couple careless mistakes, a couple charges at the end. I put this out, and it was about Cunningham. I had all the Oklahoma State fans tell me, "Oh, the refs are screwing us." They're not screwing you guys. Everybody who loses says the refs are screwing. The refs are fine. They even out. Very rarely the refs completely one-sided. It's not the guy who lost the perfect game with the first base ump who called him safe and he was out. That the ref screwed you. Outside of that, I don't want to hear about it. Cunningham's got to pull up, make some bad decisions, but he's really incredible. To me, the difference is Suggs. It's Suggs' body. He's NBA ready. He's muscular. He's strong. He's great on the ball. He's quicker than Cunningham. He's really fast feet. Cunningham is great too. They're both awesome. To me, it's Suggs number one, clearly as the top pick.
Suggs is a little bit more quick twitch too.
Quick twitch. That's a better way to say it. Thank you. Yes, that's what I mean. Yes.
Yeah, definitely. So I just to talk about that a tiny bit because you brought that up, and then I was thinking about our conversation previously, and I was like, wait a second. I think Mike might actually be onto something here. When I went back and took a look, I was like, you know what? I think there's going to be more and more people that come your direction, just like with De'Aaron Fox and Lonzo Ball, and just like with Zion and Ja Morant. You were right on with those two, and I don't see why you wouldn't be off base with this either. All right, Mike, let's go through a little game recap. You've been doing an unbelievable job over on Twitter to tell the people what's been happening each night and what's been catching your eye. Let's start with one of the hometown teams that we really follow and are passionate about, and just happy that they're doing so well. But things didn't go according to plan for Rutgers against Michigan State. Michigan State beats Rutgers 68-45. And to be honest, I watched a lot of this game, and it just got ugly for Rutgers. There were misses at the rim. There were the usual misses at the free throw line. The defense was there in spots. Henry looked amazing. What was your takeaway from Michigan State and Rutgers? And are you off the Rutgers bus, or is this just how the Big Ten is going to go this year?
No, well, I heard you in my head as I'm watching the game, and I'm mad at myself because you've said it so many times, and you're right on, that there are certain teams, particularly those that are like come-up-in teams on the way up that haven't arrived, like a Kansas, Gonzaga, Baylor, you know what I mean? You've said it so many times. There's a certain amount of efforts. They only have a certain amount of big battle, we're going to go after you tooth and nail. Come back. They can't go to that well without resetting at some point. And
Right.
that was in my head. Listen to what Rutgers has done. They've had the injuries. They beat Illinois at home. Big battle. After beating Maryland on the road, what a win. Then they play Ohio State away. Okay, they had some injuries. Jacob Young goes down. But they come back. Purdue at home without Ron Harper. Then they play Iowa. What a big game, back and forth. Oh, it's a dogfight here at the rack. And then they just ran out of gas against Michigan State. And I heard you in my head. I should have thought of it. Teams that play similar styles, that's where you're going to run out of those efforts. Great job by Rutgers. No problem. Got to make free throws, guys. Got to start making free throws. Can't shoot, from the line 6 of 17, 35%. And they were also 3-12. Michigan State had a good defensive effort. Yeah, I'm still on with Rutgers. Absolutely. They're definitely top 20 team, no doubt. They're suffering through some injuries. They got to figure it out. And they just got tired, as you have always said.
Listen, you're right with a certain number of efforts especially with a team like Rutgers, and they're trying to carve out their niche. They're trying to prove that they belong. And sometimes when you're you play with that chip on your shoulder and you just do it game after game after game, like you highlighted and ran down so perfectly. Sometimes you just lay an egg, and this was the egg that Rutgers laid. And I think that Peichel will go back and not necessarily lay on the explicatives for his team in practice. But I think he'll just play it realistically and say, like, guys, here's why we weren't good. Here are the places we need to get better. Here's how we're going to get better at those things. Let's go get better at those things. And I wouldn't be surprised, maybe the next game or the game after, we see Rutgers with a couple of improvements and a couple of adjustments. One of those adjustments being maybe get Harper a couple of more paint touches. And I wasn't pleased with how Johnson played offensively. He played an unbelievable job defensively, like he always does. He's such a disruptor and really underrated as a perimeter defender when he switches out. Like when you switch onto him, it's not just an automatic gimme. Like he can actually guard people in space a tiny bit, but I'd like to see him be a little bit more athletic, a little bit more, a little bit more catchable on the offensive end. He had a couple of gimmies where he fumbled the ball around and a couple of lost opportunities, and you throw those in with the missed free throws. That's not a recipe to win on the road in the Big Ten for sure.
They are attacked the basket, Gus, on offense.
Yes.
Waiting for the defense to make a mistake.
Yep.
And open a lane or allow an open three. And Michigan State doesn't give you that, particularly when Michigan State is like 1-3 in conference and need this win, right? Like that's what happened is that, Iowa's eventually going to break down. You're going to get an open three, right? Michigan State did not. And they didn't know how to react. Like, I'm getting to the basket. Okay, it should be an opening. Oh, there's not an opening. I travel. Fast break, 2-on-1. They're going to eventually commit. Oh, they didn't commit. Wait, I'm going to lob it. Oh, no, a turnover. That's what it looked like. You go. I'm going to run into the tunnel, Gus, and I'm going to assume that the brick wall is not there. And I'm going to come out the other end. No, it's there. And you just ran into it. And you should have brought a flashlight. I don't know what the hell I just said, but in my head it made sense.
I kind of like the tunnel and flashlight reference.
You're a good man.
I'm going to bring a flashlight the next time I get out running early in the morning for sure. At least a headlamp, that's for sure. All right, let's go Mississippi State and Missouri. I think Missouri is a net. We can just throw this into the exact same boat that we threw Rutgers into. They've been playing unbelievably well. They maybe are a little limited offensively, and maybe they just ran into an equally good defensive team in Mississippi State, and Mississippi State just kind of figured it out on offense. Mike, what do you take away from this game?
I can't figure out Missouri yet. I don't know. I like them. I think sometimes they look good. Then I'm off of them again. They're very Florida State to me. Are they just a let's go team? They get up. They make a lot of errors. I have struggled to figure out Missouri. But on the flip side, what I am happy about is I love Ben Howland. I love the Final Fours. We've talked about that. He's viewed as the Clint Eastwood, get off my lawn type of guy. Really, guys? Well, he ended up getting Molinar and Stewart to come to Mississippi State. So he's got to be doing something right. They were down. The Tigers were down 39-27 at the half. The Tigers were up 39-27 at the half. Sorry. They end up losing to Mississippi State by 15. Molinar, Stewart, 44 points. Mizzou cannot shoot threes. They're 5 of 18. So they have to, again, similar to Rutgers, like they need some openings. And in the second half, a Howland coach defense doesn't give it to you. Bulldogs are at Vandy, then 3 straight home games. So they are a sleeper for sure in the SEC. SEC's wide open. Ben Howland, well coached. They're going to play defense. They're going to rebound. If Molinar and Stewart are going to score, they're going to be an issue for sure. Bulldogs are legit in the SEC.
I think the scoring is the thing. If they can figure out a way to score a little bit more efficiently, then we're on to something there. And I'll solve your problem with Missouri. Missouri is one of those teams where we talked about in the preseason, if you have some continuity and you have upperclassmen. Let's just use Richmond as the example. Richmond's bringing back so many seniors, guys that have been there, 50-year seniors, so on and so on. And we see them go into Kentucky and win. And I know they've hit a couple of road bumps in the A-10. But that's one of those teams that you knew coming back they were going to be solid. And Missouri is one of those teams that has that upperclassman, has that culture. And so they found a little bit of success. So I think that's a common characteristic of the early college basketball season. The teams that are going to have those returnees, much like you have at Wisconsin, much like you have at Richmond, much like you have at Missouri, they're going to find early success. And maybe as the season wears on and we get into conference play and the scouts are a little bit better on each team, you know what play they're going to run before they run it. You know the out-of-bounds play. Maybe that's where some of those teams start to get exposed, like a Rutgers or maybe like a Missouri did.
Something to think about too, Gus. Missouri, spectacularly good at defending the three, only allowing 27% from beyond the arc. That's 22nd best in the country. Reason I bring that up, they play Tennessee, who does not rely on the three-pointer. They lose by 20. They play Arkansas, who heavily relies on the three-pointer. They win by 13. They play Mississippi State, who wants to slop it up, and if they make some threes, great. They end up blowing the big league. They lose by 15. So maybe it's a matchup issue. They don't want down screen, back screen. They want to get out and run. And if you like to chuck it, that's when they're in their wheelhouse. Maybe that's it. Just taking a stab at it. But interesting streak there. Lose at Tennessee by 20, beat Arkansas by 13 away, and then blow the big lead to Mississippi State, lose by 15.
SEC might be a little bit underrated. And speaking of an underrated team inside the SEC, Alabama absolutely wipes up Florida 86-71. Mike, I was kind of impressed with a couple of things here, but I think Alabama might have something figured out. And Florida, I think, is still kind of putting it back together with no, preseason SEC Player of the Year Keontae Johnson on the floor, even though he's on the bench. And I think they're still figuring out where the missing scoring is going to come from. Mike, what'd you take away from Alabama? And we've loved Coach Oates since he's been at Buffalo, so it seems like he might have things roll in the right direction there. What was your takeaway from that particular SEC matchup?
Loved Bama the entire year. Mrs. Randall then had a feeling about Bama.
we know about those feelings. Very good.
Blew the Stanford game. That was when the feeling occurred. But maybe hers was a longitudinal feeling because, as you know, her feelings are always right. Harvard over New Mexico, first round of the tournament there a few years ago when Harvard won. And they're hot, and I love them. And John Petty is getting going, which they certainly need. And if Petty gets going, it's a different team. Rojas comes off the bench, the big guy, 15-7. He's a big guy who can run the floor a little bit, back to the basket, catches at the high post as the trailer, whatever. Jones and Shackelford, 16 each. Crimson Tide 3-0. They're atop by themselves in the SEC. Bama's schedule, check this out. At Auburn, at Kentucky, Arkansas, at LSU. We'll find out all we need to know about Bama, but they look really, really good, and I like them a lot. And then they're going to have a run where they're going to have some teams at home here, Gus. So I love Bama. They got to make the threes. They got to make their free throws. Nate Oates is a good coach. They push the pace. Roll Tide.
Mike, speaking of rolling, Kansas absolutely rolled TCU. After the loss to Texas, they came back and righted the ship for sure. They beat up TCU 93-64. Statement game, get-right game. What do you feel like this was from Kansas? And did you expect a little bit more from TCU, or is this just Kansas being Kansas?
Felt good about it. I had this one in my head. I got the Texas pick wrong. And then I've always made a note. Self on the road lately in conference has been lethal. 11th consecutive Big 12 road win dating back to last year. Think about that. 11 road wins in the Big 12? That's insane. And 11-3 against the spread last 14 road games in conference. Just saying that as well. I thought it was a massive win. It didn't surprise me. This is what they do. They struggle to make those threes against Texas, but on the road, they're lethal. Abaji for three, everyone for three. Injuries abound. No Marcus Garrett. They still win by 31 on the road. Okay. McCormick, who was in the video, go to the YouTube channel at Screen the Screener Podcast YouTube to see it. McCormick, 20 points, 8 rebounds, 2 blocks versus Samuel inside. That's a legit big. Really impressed.
Totally impressed. A nice leak-in of the YouTube channel. We'll try to put a couple of those out for you to consume via video. And then very, very nicely done. And then, Mike, we have to talk a little Winthrop. Winthrop continues their winning ways. They win by 2 in the second game against Charleston Southern. They remain undefeated, and they might remain undefeated for a little while, Mike. How do you feel about those Eagles?
First off, Philandrous Fleming of Charleston Southern. Okay, Gus, this is another game that I watched live. I watched this one live as well.
He's good.
I did. Philandrous Fleming is out of control good. Lanky, tall. I think, unless I'm wrong, he was the player of the year in conference last year. Defensive player of the year in conference. I think he was at least first team. Aggressive, can shoot it. Thick. He's definitely an NBA prospect. Went bananas. 33 points against Winthrop, 5 of 9. And Gus, he fouled out with 8 minutes left. No one knows that. Unbelievable game for Charleston Southern. Very gamey. They've been dealing with some injuries. Players who are out, they expected to be back. I think he is their only starter that from last year coming into this game. Charleston Southern not having a great year, but I want to commend them for that. Winthrop's legit. Faldrin, 17 points, 3 of 8 from beyond the arc. Winthrop's 9-0. They're number 1 in the country, folks. Number 1 in adjusted tempo per KenPom. Who plays the fastest? Winthrop does. Eagles, they're 19-0. They could be, if they run this upcoming schedule, headed into Radford, who's by far the second best team in the conference, on February 11th. So I'm projecting Eagles here for 19-0. I'm surprised on the second day of a back-to-back against Winthrop that Charleston Southern, with all their injuries and all their struggles, were able to hang with them, because what happens is you play Winthrop the first time, maybe you hang around. The second day, their depth and their talent run you the hell off the freaking court. That's what normally happens. Did not happen here, but I don't see them losing, Gus, until Radford on February 11th. That's going to be their big test. Rock the hill.
Rock the hill is right. When we talked to Alex over during the off season from the Rock Hill Herald, Philandrous Fleming was one of the players that we talked about in conference, but by no means did we think that he was going to be this impactful. Holy smokes. Love that the Winthrop Eagles are doing their thing. All right, Mike. Time for a little bit of Gus Got Next.
Yeah, who you got? Look forward to it every week.
I got a squad. We are waiting on the sidelines, and we are going to grab winner on the court, and we are not going to get off until next week. And each week, we try to highlight a couple of players that have done their thing on the court that might be a little bit off the radar, or maybe not getting the headlines that they might deserve, much like Winthrop. First player on my squad this week is, I'm going to take Paul Atkinson. And here's why. He announced the Yale graduate transfer is going to play his final season at Notre Dame. The 6'10 power forward was co-player of the year last year in the Ivy, put up 17-plus points, 7 rebounds, and shot it over 60% from the field. He averaged almost a steal and a block per game as well. And if we just take a look at this season of how impactful the Ivy transfers have been, we see Mike Smith at undefeated Michigan. So we've mentioned Seth Towns a number of different times on the program. The Harvard transfer from Ohio State. Aiken is getting healthy for Seton Hall. And then we just talked about Bama, and we have Bruner, former Yale player as well, doing big things on the interior for them. So I don't see I don't know why Atkinson wouldn't replicate that success that these Ivy transfers have had this particular season. So Notre Dame's got a good one there. You know what? Who's going to pass him the ball? It's going to be Jalen Pickett from Siena. Of course. Saints are back. And thankfully, after their long COVID stoppage, Pickett is just one of the best guards in the nation that you might not know yet. The 6'4 junior, he's a lead guard. He had 18 points and 14 boards in a win over King Rice and his Mama squad. Love Pickett's entire game and skill set. Mike, you tweeted about Danny Pippen from Kent State.
Oh, my goodness. This guy's a man. He's a man, this guy. Oh, my goodness. Go ahead.
I mean, the 6'9 senior went off. I was happy enough to view the solid showdown against Akron and Lauren Christian Jackson. LCJ put up 31 and 6, but Pippen continued to light up the box score. He had 34, 16 boards, 4 blocks, 4 made threes in a final minute crushing loss, 84-82 to Toledo. Pippen can just flat out ball. He might be the Maction player of the year. That's no doubt. And then my last player, and we'll talk UConn a little bit here, is Tyler Polley. The 6'9 senior waited for his turn. He waited for his time. When you go on the road in the Big East and your all Big East guard gets hurt and plays a little bit subpar, Bouknight did not play like his usual self and was a little injured with his elbow, and you're down double digits in the first half, that usually spells a loss, but not in Polley's world. He made 5 threes, had 23 points in a 65-53 win for the Huskies. He can save my squad anytime. So that's my squad this week. We're going to take the Yale transfer, Paul Atkinson. Jalen Pickett's going to run the point for us. He's going to kick it to Danny Pippen. And then if we get in trouble late game, we're going to call on Tyler Polley to bail us out from UConn. And Mike, I think now's a good time. Do you want to expound a little bit on UConn and why it's important for Coach Hurley and the Huskies to be an important program in our sport, especially with Kentucky and Duke being down a little bit?
Yeah, I love what Hurley's doing there with UConn. Of course, all the negativity that went on when Calhoun was out and they had Kevin Ollie there. So we want some positive mojo. I got to meet Coach Hurley, sit down and have coffee with him, talk to him for a couple hours one time, the father. Just a great, great guy. They're blue collar. They're all about hoops. They're Jersey through and through. So we root for him. They went out to Marquette. I think Marquette stinks. I've been telling you that. They screwed me against Creighton, who, by the way, I don't know if you noticed, Gus, took Seton Hall to the woodshed tonight out there in Omaha. Okay.
Ouch.
But Marquette it's not anything about Marquette. I just think they're very limited. I don't think DJ Carton is a first-team All-Big East player this year. I don't think he's coming in doing 18-8. I don't see it. And Kobe McEwen, who, again, you were correct, is excellent. Teams are keying on him. And that's what Connecticut did in this game. UConn beat 65-54. They win at Marquette. Bouknight only 6 points, and they win by 11 points. I mean, if you're Marquette, that's horrific. Sonogo and Carlton had foul trouble. I mean, this is crazy. But it was a great win for them. Carlton and McEwen only 13 points because they're playing the Hurley defense, 6 of 19 from the field combined. UConn now 2-1 in the Big East. Only loss was that 2-point overtime loss to Creighton. I don't know, Gus, if I mentioned to you that they didn't cover because Bouknight hit a 3 at the buzzer. I don't know if I thought buzzer.
Yes,
and Marquette has lost 4 of their last 5 Big East games. So Connecticut, Hurley doing it right. Bouknight is an All-American type 1, 2, 3 team player. He's in there. He's in that conversation. And Definitely. Right now, he's the Big East player of the year for sure. No offense, Sandro.
No offense, Sandro. I like that. Okay. Mike, let's get to your segment of a couple of things that you like. Mike likes. What were a couple of things that you really like from the past week, or a couple of things that you like moving forward for some of the listeners out there if they might have their eye on something or looking for a trend or two to maybe wager on or maybe pay attention to with some of the games coming up?
Yeah, before we get to the games coming up, a couple things I want to say. I did, Gus, happen to watch Kent State Toledo. Okay, Kent State Pippen is incredible. He can shoot it. He can dribble. He's jacked. He's massive. I'm watching like this is not normal. 34 points, 16 rebounds, 4 blocks, and 6 of 12 from three-point range. I'll say that again. 34 points, okay, with 16 rebounds. Oh, he's a big. 4 blocks. Oh, I guess he's a big. 6 of 12 from three-point range. Wait, what is it? Exactly. He's
right.
Is what he is.
He's amazing.
Outstanding player. And there's a lot of Cassius Winston in Marion Jackson, their point guard. The way they play, he hit a big time 3 there against Kent State. Had to have it after Pippen had made a shot. Jackson makes a shot. They take the lead. Spencer Littleson, if you see Spencer Littleson, you will not think he's good. He reminds me of the White Man Can't Jump. What was Woody Harrelson's name?
Oh, Billy. I was going to say he reminds me of Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah, Matthew McConaughey, except in White Men Can't Jump. There you go. I'm going to turn that into the title of the pod somehow. Those two guys combined for 48 points, 5 steals, 12 of 19 from three-point range. What does that even mean? That was a huge win. So I love Maction. Only other thing I noticed, Guns, I put out today, top 3-point shooters, 40 attempts in the country in college basketball. Worth noting, Alex Barcelo at BYU, relax. It doesn't mean they're covering 7.5, but he is at 63%, which is very impressive. Nate Lazuski, 58.9%. Before you start yelling, he has 39 attempts. I rounded up. I put it in. Don't start yelling at me. Allen out in Georgia State's fantastic, 54.2%. DJ Wilkins at Drake, of course, it's not just Roman Penn. We love Roman Penn, 53%. Brewer out at FIU, 52%. Johnson at Xavier's fantastic, 50.8%. Young Lee out in Davidson, also amazing. People think Kellen Grady. Lee is probably their best all-around player. The god that is Corey Kispert at 50.8 as well. Stefanovic for 3, 50.8 for Purdue. At home, he's 77%, something like that, but 50.8 overall. Right. And Oliveri of Rice, 49.3. So there's something I noticed there with the three-point shooters.
Well
Three
done.
balls alive and well, Gus.
Oh, man, I'm so glad we ran down that list. That's a list of great shooters. I hope we get to watch a couple of those shooters, and we get to see two of them go head-to-head on Thursday. Totally looking forward to that. Speaking of that, Mike, we got Gonzaga and BYU on Thursday, but then also on Thursday we have Oregon heading up to altitude at Colorado and Indiana visiting Wisconsin. Is there anything that catches your eye on Thursday or something that you might be paying attention to wager-wise, or maybe you have a feel for one of those games?
Yeah, I haven't figured out Colorado yet. They lose away at Arizona. They beat Grand Canyon on a neutral. Then they lose away at Arizona. Then they stick it to me with USC by 10. And then they lose a tough one there at UCLA. So now they play Oregon. The Buffs, of course, crashed last year after a great start to the year. They end up being 12-2. They lose their last 5 games of the year, including the Pac-12. Home UCLA loss, away Cal loss, away Stanford loss, away Utah loss, Washington State on a neutral. Smell you later. But they did go up to Oregon and find a win. They beat Oregon at home 74-65, and then they ended up going on the road to Oregon and lost a very close game. So what do I think about this game? It's fascinating. I want to see what the line is. Let me check it. But I think Colorado's live here because they just do stuff when I don't think they're going to do it. And I'm impressed with Oregon. They looked really good against Stanford. No Davis in that game. Very athletic. But Colorado and Boulder, we've talked about this trip, a little frisky. What do you think? Let me look up the line.
You know what? I think that Oregon may have a little issue with the altitude. And I think if you're going into it a little rundown, a little out of schedule, a little off what you would normally do on a travel, I think adding the extra element of playing at altitude might put you at a little disadvantage. That's the only reason I brought that up. I thought that depending on what the number might be, but I think anytime you're going to go to a place that's going to add another obstacle in the already 110 high hurdle race that is travel in the United States right now, I think that's something to pay attention to, and maybe even the best coaches and most well-schooled student athletes might not be able to overcome on the road.
Hey, Gus, let's play Guess the Line. What do you think?
Oh, I think it's
tomorrow 5 o'clock.
I think maybe, how about Oregon by 2.5?
How about Colorado by 2? That make it frisky for you?
Very frisky, yeah.
Yep, go ahead. Yep.
Very frisky. Okay, and then Indiana, Wisconsin also. Much like you said, you haven't figured out Colorado. I don't think I figured out Indiana. The one thing that we do know about Indiana is that Trace Jackson Davis is absolutely a man beast. He is playing unbelievably well. He is so slippery in the lane, and it seems like he gets his hands and has a great second jump on any sort of offensive rebound. Really impressed with what he's doing. So I'm intrigued by this because you want to see how he matches up against the bigs that exist in Wisconsin with Potter and Reavers, and you want to see if he can have the same impact inside against those long 7-footers that Wisconsin is going to throw his way.
Wisconsin right now, 3-1 in the Big Ten, beat Nebraska home, beat Michigan State away, lost to Maryland at home, bounced back, beat Minnesota by 12. Indiana 2-2, lost to Northwestern at home, tough loss at Illinois, beat Penn State at home, had to have it in OT, beat Maryland, pretty late run there. What do you think the line is? You're going to be shocked at this one.
How about Wisconsin by 9?
Her correction, I'm going to be shocked by this one. It's Wisconsin by 8. Right now, and I could change this, I'm leaning towards taking the points. Have bigs will travel. That Indiana team played very well at Florida State, lost in overtime. Also played very well at Illinois. they pulled away late for a cover they shouldn't have gotten. I understand Wisconsin is really good. I love them, but they've had some odd games. Marquette away odd, Maryland home odd. Even Minnesota, who's terrible on the road, only lost by 12. I think that's too many points for Indiana. Right now, I'm leaning Indiana. What do you got?
I would lean that way too. How about that? How does that sound?
It's a lot of points. It's a lot of. I mean, we sure Wisconsin is the buzzsaw Baylor Gonzaga level. I don't know about that.
This game might help illustrate and tell the story for that, but also I think we pay attention to pace of play here. I don't know if pace of play is going to allow for a double-digit win either way. Let's take a look at Friday. Purdue is going to visit Michigan State. Hey, is this going to be a hangover game for Michigan State? Henry's playing like he's got something figured out. Is Purdue going to win any games on the road, or are they just going to hold court at Mackey? What do you think here on Friday? I like that the Big Ten has like this target game on Friday evenings now.
Seinfeld refuses to run. I refuse to pick this game. I don't like either team. I don't like Purdue. I don't like Michigan State. I'm not sold. Gabe Brown for 3. Henry's a big scorer. Hauser's on the side of a milk carton. I don't have a pick on this game. I really don't. I'm going to see the line. If he gave me like 8, I'd take Purdue. If it's 4, I'll take – God, this is a game I don't want to watch, which I will.
Well, I'll watch it, but we just may not wager on it. Let's hit Saturday after, Mike. All right, we got a couple of goodies already. Ohio State is going to visit the RAC and Reeling Rutgers. Is Rutgers going to get it figured out by this game, or do you think it's going to take another game for them to figure it out?
I believe in Steve Peichel. I think they bounce back. I don't know what's going to happen in this game, but I expect a very strong effort. Right now, Ken Pom has it, Rutgers by 1. I think it's going to be a great game. Rutgers at the RAC is very, very tough. I lean Rutgers in a big spot here, big bounce back.
I don't know if it's going to be bounce back right away, but I think the effort is going to be there. Will the execution around the rim and at the foul line be there for Rutgers? That's really going to help tell the story. We got number 4, Texas. They're going to travel to number 14, West Virginia. 2 interesting plots here, Mike. It's going to tell us 2 different things. Is Texas for real? And should they really be inside the top 5? And is West Virginia going to be a little bit better thanks to subtraction for Oscar Tshiebwe going into the transfer portal? And was this one game maybe just a Band-Aid? And will the players be in more successful roles for Coach Huggins? So I'm intrigued by both dynamics and both storylines here. Is this Texas team really this good? And can West Virginia get it figured out with a little roster turmoil?
You know, West Virginia has played very, very well since the second half of the Northeastern game. No more Tshiebwe. He's transferring. They were behind to Oklahoma, who shot the lights out at home, but they made a massive comeback. And then they had that big comeback now against Oklahoma State. They're going to be home. They're going to be underdogs by 1, give or take. I kind of like West Virginia here. I like Shaka. It's fine. It's all about the matchups. Iowa State caused Texas a lot of problems because they can match up the guards. You know, West Virginia can do that also with Miles McBride, Naz Sherman, all those guys. And they got the big inside who's a legit big. Culver can get out and guard you a little bit. I don't know. You're going to give me points at West Virginia, and they're playing really well right now. I'm going to take Bob Huggins. I think it's addition by subtraction with Tshiebwe.
I think the swing vote here is going to be how does the freshman Brown play? Because I don't know if West Virginia necessarily has somebody to match up with him on the wing with his size, length, and skill set. If he's going to play like a freshman on the road in the Big 12, then I'll take West Virginia. If he's going to play like one of the best freshmen in the country on the road inside the Big 12, then I'd lean Texas. So I think he's my swing vote as far as where that goes. Mike, let's go to Kentucky and Florida. Normally, this is like a huge matchup inside the SEC. The Wildcats are off that wild OT win. The Gators are off the beatdown of Alabama. I think it's going to be a telling game for both programs. Which way do you think this is going to go, and which way do you think both of these programs are headed?
Yeah, that's a good question. They're visiting Florida. That's a toughie. Yeah. I kind of believe in Cal. He's so shorthanded, though, right now. My instinct is to take the under. That's my response because Florida will play great defense at home. Kentucky made a lot of threes last game, but I don't believe it yet. I think it's a lower scoring game. How about that? That's a tough one to match up there because is Mike White in free fall yet? You know, have they got the boost from wanting to win one for Keontae Johnson, who's now a coach on the sidelines, or is Kentucky headed in the right direction? I kind of lean Kentucky, but I really like the under, whatever it is there.
Interesting. I kind of like where your head's at there as far as the under goes. Let's go a couple more Gonzaga is going to visit Portland. Are they going to have a hangover effect after the big game on against BYU, Mike? Or is this just going to be another run-of-the-mill, or are we going to wait to see what happens Thursday and then act accordingly with this particular matchup?
Gonzaga minus points. Next.
Fair enough. All right. No way that Clemson's going to win at UNC again, right, Mike?
I don't know about that. They play really good defense. Sims did nothing in the North Carolina State game and then came alive at the end. Old Roy's got some problems because he doesn't have many great guards and they don't shoot the three. I don't know about that. Clemson's defense is for real.
I agree that Clemson's defense is for real. I want to see what Sims does against all of the bigs at UNC because he's been playing unbelievably well at an all first team ACC type level for Clemson. And then, Mike, how about LSU on the road at Mizzou? We talked about Missouri earlier in the program. Cameron Thomas is probably my third favorite freshman to watch in the nation right now behind Sexton Cunningham. He can fill it up. He's averaging almost 25 points a game. He can just shoot it. Like, whoa, holy smokes. I kind of like LSU on the road here in this particular spot. I think they might actually have enough scoring to kind of run Mizzou a little ragged. What do you feel like here?
Generate 31% of their points from three-point range. Missouri D's up the three well. I kind of lean the Tigers if the line is small. I see, LSU won at Florida, stumbled against Georgia. Were they looking ahead to Missouri? I don't think so. I think that's more revealing than you think. Kind of like the Tigers here to bounce back at home with Kwanzaa. That's my lean right now at the top of my head.
All right, so I'm going to go the other way on that one. And, Mike, I just want to say thank you. Thank you to you for finding time during the busy schedule to do the podcast for the listeners out there. So pleased to talk some college hoops with you and have the listeners be part of the audience. And thank you, listeners. Thank you for letting us keep you company during the college basketball season. We're totally appreciative and hope that we help fill up some of that dead time and maybe fill a commute or maybe fill some of that time at home if you're working from home. So thanks for letting us, talk some hoops with you, at you, and alongside of you. And we'll be watching every game this weekend, just like you guys. Mike, anything else for the listeners out there?
Yeah, I got to get to Boise State Air Force now.
Hey, that sounds good. I'll meet you there. All right, listeners, thank you so much. Cheers, Salacha, God, Salazzi. We'll catch up with you before you know it.